Welcome to another episode of TRG Talk Digital. I'm your host, Rick Ivanovic, and with me today, I have Brian O'Reilly. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Rick.
So Brian O'Reilly and full stop, no job title. Now, I've known you for a while, some decades, I think, and you've had a slew of different job titles. So I'm curious, because I haven't seen you for about a year. What are you up to these days?
Well, as you know, I've been in Vietnam now 24 years, not quite as long as you, but yeah. And these days, I'm involved in a small management consulting company with two partners, one from America and one from France. It's called Crossroads Vietnam. And basically, we just cover areas such as project management, change management, leadership, planning, etc., etc. In addition, of course, as you know, I've been involved in higher education, particularly in relation to business. So I still do some lecturing there. And of course, when the occasion arises, I'm quite happy to develop and deliver corporate training programs for organizations across Vietnam. So that's basically where I'm at the moment. It's not too challenging, but quite enjoyable. I like to keep my finger on the pulse as such, and it's quite a nice way to operate in Vietnam. And I suppose, like everybody else, the impact of COVID after COVID, I was sort of looking at, before COVID, I was looking at how I would wind down. And then COVID, I found that sitting at home was, to put it plainly, it got very boring after a while. There was only so much Netflix and YouTube and stuff you could do. And even during COVID, I managed to get online work. But I realized, well, as long as I'm able to, it'd be nice to, I don't need to be killing myself working, but it'd be nice to be involved in, as I say, pass on my knowledge and skills to the next generation.
No, that's wonderful. So you have the privilege of picking and choosing what work you want to do and how hard you want to work.
Well, to a certain extent, but it's when you say picking and choosing, yes, but of course, if somebody comes along who's been a good client in the past, it's very hard to not pick, So sometimes it can be quite busy and sometimes it can be quite relaxed. And as long, it seems funny, somebody of my age, but it's a gig economy in many ways. Mm-hmm. And if you like that, it's quite nice. You have your busy times during the week, busy times throughout the year, but sometimes a Monday morning is just Sunday plus one,
Okay, you've been here for a while, 24 years, and you've done many things, but I feel that I know you more linked to education, okay? What trends are you seeing in the market here in Vietnam at the moment?
Well, I suppose I should, be clear that my area of education is tertiary business education. So I'm not speaking from K to 12 or obviously the major trend is obviously the digitization of education, and at the various universities using like incorporating new software into making the experience for the students better is what a number of institutions are doing. I'm not going to name any institutions here, but the more proactive institutions are looking at the technology out there, the impact of course, artificial intelligence, GPT, and looking at how do you make technology something that is of benefit to the students, and that's the positive side of it. But of course, the negative side is, did that student actually write that assignment, or did ChatGPT write that assignment? And so that's that's a major issue. So the technology, moving to technology is the trend, but it's really to make sure that the technology is used for in a positive way rather than a negative way for the students. And the students may think that, well, I can go in and get whatever on ChatGPT, but they're not learning and developing, and that's the problem. So when they graduate, they don't have the knowledge and skills they need. And that's another area, if you don't mind, is that in all types of education is the development of the skills of students. So that's a very, very important thing. It's okay to know and understand something from a theoretical perspective, but can you go out and actually use it in the workplace? And that technology can help with that, of course, with things like simulation, etc., etc. But on the other side, students can take shortcuts, which limit their development. So I think the two main trends are, just to summarize, would be technology, which is obviously going to keep being a driving force, and the development of the skills. And may I add there, this is something that people may not understand. They think about, generative AI. Oh, this is all technology, but I'm not an expert on AI, but I do listen to podcasts, and I'm not sure whether it was one of the two major IT companies that said that, whilst everybody thinks all of this is about technology, the soft skills or people skills are at least as important as they were in the past, if not even more important. So so it's not just understanding how to apply technology. It's all of the people skills or soft skills are still very, very important, even in this digital age. Yeah.
Now, I'll pick up on a comment you said is, the concern about all of this is, on the one hand, this is great tech, education, higher education, universities are embracing this to improve the sort of student experience and to incorporate some of this tech in what they're doing. But on the flip side is, did the student really write it? And is the student developing the right skills that they need? Now, the scenario here is we're applying it to students on some new piece of tech. But if we move away to older people already in the workforce, and generative AI is also coming in, and they're also using it already. They're supposed to have developed the skills, in their youth and through education. Aren't they in more or less the same position? Isn't it the same sort of quandary?
Well, the important at the very early days, and let's be realistic. This GBT or ChatGPT, it's only been a few years, so it's nothing time-wise. And of course, some of the first reactions, I'm not even sure what my first reaction was. Well, block the students from using it. You know what I mean? But it's a sort of like, I'm not going to go into King Canute turning back the tide, but it's a bit like that. That tide is coming in. It doesn't care. It doesn't matter what we think. So institutions realize now that, from a student perspective, you have to learn how to do this. You have to keep up with it. But when you graduate, if you don't graduate with whatever skills you're supposed to have. Now, moving on to the people already out there, and I think we are included in that one. It's just a tool, and I think it's been overplayed, what it's doing. But what I would recommend to people is look at it, whatever GBT or Perplexity or whatever, it doesn't matter which one. At least develop some sort of an understanding of the tools, what they can do, and use them. So for me, for example, if I want to write something, and I'm a project management professional, so I did this podcast on prompting. So it was, and I've also done a course on prompting. So the next morning, I created my little sort of project just on a piece of paper, because obviously I've worked in lots of projects. And I asked it, can you write me, 400-word project charter based on the information below? And, within a couple of minutes, bang, there's a project charter, which is a project proposal. And I looked through it and I thought, that's about 80% there. So there's a huge saving in time. Now, the only difference probably between people like us and the students is, well, I already knew what the answer was going to be should look like. But if you take that very small example, if I've saved, we'll say 80% of my time just writing one thing, and it could take a few hours from scratch, that's a big saving. So you're getting the computer to do the basic work, and you're doing the high level work. So using, we'll say, Pareto principle. So you just focus on the top end of it, where the human should be. So for the people, who are in the workforce, again, it's not my quote, but somebody said it's not so much that this technology is going to take your job. If you don't keep up with this technology, you don't remain current. So that's, for me, it would be to recommend to people, learn what's out there. How can it help you with your job? How can it make you more productive? And I think that's the big thing in it. You don't have to become a technical expert. I'm never going to become a technical expert with any of that, but I want to know how I can use it to make my life easier to get the results. I think, and again, I think what people need to be aware of course, is if you're using what's called open source, well, it's everything that's out there. So it's a bit like Wikipedia. There's no guarantee what it's telling you is correct. So I think people like us with experience, we have a very good idea what the answer should look like. So it's just giving us the answer quickly. But if you don't know the answer, you're not sure of something, that's where you need to do some extra research to make sure that whatever you're writing is credible. And to me, I think that's going to be one of the big problems with this, is that people are going to be creating reports, et cetera, thinking that the information they've got from these is correct. And if you don't know the answer, check some credible sources.
I think, I was reading an article and it was talking about, just to pick up on your point, it produced the project charter. You read through it and it says, all right, that's about 80% right. Now, look at it from another point of perspective is, it's 80% right, and it's 20% wrong. You know what to correct, okay? For someone who isn't as experienced as you, they might think it's 100% correct, and that's where the wheels start falling off. So this article I was reading was really talking about, it's even more important now that we do have some other skills, like the critical thinking skills. Because if you don't know that, you could just be blindly accepting what it's telling you, and the wheels are going to fall off, aren't they?
Now, don't get me going about critical thinking, because
why not?
For me, over the years, you have creative thinking, and we're all talking about innovation now, and all of that is very, very important. My own pet is systems thinking. I love looking at things as systems. And I think many of us forgot that the fundamental thinking, critical thinking, was still very, very important. And unfortunately, I do spend a little bit of my time looking at newspaper articles, and then you only have to look at the comments of people in newspaper articles, regardless of where they come from around the world, to see that people have lost, in many cases, the ability to think critically. And to me, that should be a core, how would you say, area. Whether you have it as a separate thing in a school or build it into various courses, I think to develop critical thinking skills is more important than ever, because if people accept what they're given as being true, that is a very, very dangerous thing. So I'm glad you brought up that, because to me, we have to go back to the fundamentals of critical thinking and teach people how to do it. Not everybody's going to do it, but at least. And the best place to start is with students. But you think of it, even for us, I know, it wasn't that important back, but if we go back 30 years ago or whatever, you were applying critical thinking skills, but you didn't, I wouldn't say it wasn't important, it was, but you didn't have this vast amount of information coming at you, and you certainly didn't have something that you could ask a question to and give you an answer just like that. So when we were writing a report or something, we had to go and source and you knew where the sources were. So it's very important. I think any of the progressive universities definitely emphasize critical thinking, and I think it's important in the workplace. You said, what about the people out in the workplace? Well, make sure that they don't accept everything is coming off up in the computer has been true. Yeah.
Now, before we start the podcast, you were sharing me about this book, Vietnamese Higher Education at a Crossroads. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it's mainly, it was just a number of people involved in higher education, mainly, of course, Vietnamese academics, but myself and my colleague, Dr. Thomas Goodot, got involved. And the Crossroads basically is about, you could say it's the crossroads for every industry with digitization, but it really is. How does education cross from the traditional non-digital to now we've got the artificial intelligence, etc., coming in? But the area that we looked at, and I won't spend too much time, is we talked about earlier about skills gaps, work-ready graduates, and what we did was just did some research on existing knowledge on it, like what would you call it, secondary research, and it was to look at how higher education institutions can collaborate with industry to produce work-ready graduates. In other words, and what we found, actually, we should have put government in there too, but I think all it's sort of saying is that to make sure that the graduates of the future are actually getting educated in what it should be, that industry plus government plus the institutions should work together so that the curriculum or syllabus is geared towards giving them the knowledge, understanding and skills they need to go into the workplace. And I think this, our findings were, they need to collaborate, and obviously more research, should be done. But one of the problems today, and I was only listening to this on a radio show, is that it's more critical now than ever because all of this new technology is coming in. So what should we be teaching students that will gear them up for what's coming in 5 or 10 years? And you're have more expertise in technology than I have. But do we really know what's coming in 5 or 10 years? But we need to give them the skills at least so they're ready to take on what's coming in the future. We can't predict where the technology will have gone to, but just a simple one would be critical thinking skills, but it would be to give them those skills that they need to be able to adapt. So the people that are going to survive are the ones that can adapt in the new environment. So maybe it's more about skills rather than technical knowledge. That I think the technical knowledge goes without saying. If you need to keep up with whatever's coming, but do you have the skills to adapt to what's coming in the future? But I think one of the problems you have, and this is Vietnam, but you can apply this to every country. So is that the students can't get the jobs they want when they graduate from universities because a lot of what they've got is just knowledge without being able to apply it. And of course, industry is complaining that they can't get the people with the skills they need in the industry. So I think what it's saying here, and I might also work with the Vietnam Business Forum, is that maybe the government would lead this, but make sure that industry and education work closer together to make sure that how the learning and development taking place in the institutions produces the graduates that are ready to be able to go into workforce and at least perform a little bit better than maybe they're doing at the moment, So,
how good do you think is the alignment and/or collaboration between industry and these educational institutions?
Well, it's like everything, and I'm not here to criticize anybody, but it's like everything in life. we should be aiming for the ideal solution, even though we know we're never going to get to the ideal solution. Aim for perfection, but so there's a lot. I think there's a lot of areas for improvement. But if you look at it, and you think COVID, it's still only a few years. It's not that you've got the digitization of everything. The world, is a little bit chaotic at the moment. You don't even know what tariffs are going to be where. You've got a couple of conflicts going on. So, if you look at it from a business's perspective, they're probably up to here trying to just keep the normal operations going. So, whilst this is very important, if you're running your business from day to day, you're really trying to focus on all of these pressures, recover from COVID. You're looking at your supply chains, if that's important for you. You're looking at the technology, and then you're thinking, if I'm exporting wherever, are the tariffs going to change? So, and then when you look at the institutions, again, it's a different set of problems, but people, are very, very busy just with the normal day-to-day stuff. But I think that maybe, if time allows to be more strategic, where they could get together and say, well, this is what we need, I think it would be beneficial to all in the long term. But who am I to say to busy CEOs of education institutions or in industry that you should be spending a lot more time on this? But all I would say to people is, if you're not doing it, maybe you should consider, is there some ways that you could become more involved? One of the things we did talk about was chambers of commerce, where you could, the chambers of commerce, like I'm vice chair of the Education and Training Committee with the American Chamber of Commerce. And so maybe we can bring them together a little bit through the chamber to look at, well, this is the needs of industry, and how could the education institutions, adapt to maybe provide better graduates. It's never going to be perfect, and I'm not saying that people aren't doing a good job or trying to do it, but it's certainly, you don't want that situation where the graduates can't get the jobs they wanted, and industry can't get the graduates. So it's a sort of like you've got two gaps which should not be there. So you want to minimize those gaps to make more of these graduates work ready, so it comes down here.
Those exact gaps exist pretty much everywhere, I believe. Do you think they're getting bigger?
No, I'm not going to say I don't have any. I get the feeling, again, moving towards the technological developments, that if they're not getting bigger, there is a danger of them getting bigger, in the sense that, with technology itself, it just changes so quickly. So, so maybe, and I know this happens, so maybe the big IT companies can work with institutions to make sure that the students have access to the latest sort of applications or whatever. Because if you developed something 2 years ago, well, it becomes pretty redundant, So, and that's a big challenge, is that, I think it's, again, going back to maybe giving people the skills to be able to understand technology and how to apply it. And even at my age, I'm trying to do that. Mm-hmm. So, but there is a danger with the rapid changes with technology that everything could get left behind. And I think that's a very specific area with institutions, with education institutions working with industry, would be working with the IT industry. And I know that is happening. And that if you're studying whatever at university, that you've got access to what's considered the latest technology rather than something that happened 5 years ago.
Okay. What's your vision for the future of education here in Vietnam?
Here in Vietnam? Well, I suppose the first thing I'd like to point out that was, when I came to Vietnam first, my background was originally in civil engineering. So that was about 15 years. Then I wisely or whatever did an MBA and got involved in restructuring of organizations, implementing SAP. Or three, even got involved in financial statements, etc., etc. So just to let you know, when I arrived in Vietnam, I was looking at that sort of work. I actually was not involved in higher education. And then suddenly I got this, I looked at this business lecturing with an institution, and I thought, oh, well, I mean, I know the business part of it. Suddenly I got involved in, I'm doing some lecturing in business. And then they asked me to launch an MBA program. So I got into the management side very, very quickly. That was about 22 years ago now, I think. I began to realize that I had whatever number of years experience, but I really enjoyed the teaching or lecturing, and it was a good way, as I said earlier, to be able to hand over or give people the benefit of my knowledge and skills, whatever the word. So your question was about the future. I think I'd like to be more on the optimistic side, and I say to students, so I'm a baby boomer, just in case anybody, and in some of the places, my students are Generation Z or Z, the American pronunciation, but it's quite interesting that when I look at the technology, when I was studying civil engineering, I don't know if there was much technology, actually. I think there was one computer in the whole institution compared to what they have now. It's amazing. And I talk to the students about this. You've got basically access to unlimited knowledge now. And I don't think people appreciate that. To me, whilst there's a lot of stuff out there that you shouldn't be wasting your time with, the fact that if you want to become an expert in something, if you're at a university with an online library, you basically go in and read and read and read and read. So I think maybe we should be doing more with the students to emphasize how lucky they are to have all of this knowledge. I also think that if we do the if the syllabus is basically a course, but a curriculum if we look at developing skills with technology as well, so that the students realize you have to develop skills along the way and nothing is going to stay static. That would be a big positive as well. And I think for me, adaptability is to, going back again, and I don't want to bore people on this, but when I graduated, it was the same. Nothing changed from year to year to year. So if you knew how, like project management is one of my areas, what you needed technological-wise in project management, the year I graduated and 3 or 4 years later didn't change. There was very little. You didn't have the, it was still, but today, if you're involved in, we'll say, project management, you need to understand, the whole cloud thing and all the different ways of doing things and the different platforms that are out there. So I'm a bit positive about it because I think that to summarize, I think one, you can get a lot of you can get a lot of stuff out to people that wouldn't necessarily have it before. So the only thing you really need today is access to the internet. So somebody that lives in a remote area with access to the internet can get access to a lot of stuff out there, whether it's any of the big tech companies like Microsoft, Apple, or whatever. So the online learning is a great opportunity. And I think also that when we develop a lot of the technology, you can have virtual classrooms, whether it's, you can even have a combination of virtual and augmented reality. But I think that's where there's going to be some really big advantages. But I think it has to focus on the people who would not necessarily have access to this. But to me, it would be brilliant One, as I said, you've nearly got unlimited knowledge. But secondly, you can get it out to people that 10 or 20 years ago would never, ever been able to access this. And let's face it, if we want to make this a better planet and whatever, educating as many people as possible to make them as productive as possible is one of the most important things.
Now, 24 years in Vietnam, and that wasn't the start of your career. You had a long career before all of that. As you say, you're a baby boomer. What's the most important lesson that you've learned over your career?
I would say interpersonal. In my early days, I won't go into the details, but yeah, I think regardless of all the technology and everything else, interpersonal skills was very important. The first project I managed was a small road construction project. And I didn't realize that just by talking to people and showing a little bit of interest in the people working on the project, that their perception of you could change quite dramatically. So I think people, you have to, for everybody, no matter what you're doing, try and deal with people in an ethical fashion, try and be fair with people, and be genuinely interested in people. And I've found that throughout my life, if people know you're genuine, they mightn't agree with you. They don't have to like you, but they respect you, it makes a big difference. So for me, it's nice to be liked, but it's more important to be respected. And if you're considered a person who is genuinely interested, trying to do the things as best you can, based on whatever values you've got, I think that is very, very important. And I think that's going to be even more important as the world becomes more virtual, because trust is something that if it can make a big difference, and it takes a long time to build. It can go down basically in seconds or whatever. So I would say to people, interpersonal skills, things like communication, etc., etc. Very, very important.
In your career, have you had any strong influencers, any mentors, or anyone?
I didn't really have. I wouldn't say I had somebody, and it's something I would advise people. Yeah, I had some people who are, we'll say, informal mentors, but I've done a lot of I do lecturing in leadership, I do training in leadership. I mean, leadership is a very broad. But when I look at when I'm maybe doing a class and it talks about business leaders, when I look back at, we'll say, 2 or 3, 4 leaders that were my leaders, my bosses, that I really respected. To me, they are sort of, I would say, a guide. I can use them as a strong guiding force. These people had strong principles of values, and you could see why they were so successful. And that's the evidence. I've got evidence of my own life of the people that I considered to be really good leaders. And of course, it goes without saying they had to be ethical leaders as well. And to me, if I'm looking at a situation, I can think, well, I could go back to these 3 or 4. What would they do in that situation? Because I know that they were people who, I mean, trust is not just about integrity. They were also very knowledgeable. You have to be a competent leader. I mean, no matter how much you trust me, Rick, if you need open heart surgery, I'm not probably the person to come to. But you know what I mean? So I use, whilst I read a lot about it and whatever, I still like to go back to the people that were my leaders and that I respect and respected to a very high level, and use, well, what were they like? What would they do in a situation like this? And that helps me make my decisions from, and try and come up with the best solutions.
So I'm going to pick up on a point you just touched on when you first answered the question. Is you said, yeah, it's important to have a mentor. Okay. What is it about a mentor that is so important to people now?
Well, we just put it in that it's when we're talking about mentors, and you're talking about somebody maybe our age with somebody younger. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to go that way, but no, I think it's important in that you've got people who have lived life like us, and you're providing younger people, and I do this with some young business people. You're providing young people with some guidance. You can't get, it's very difficult to get this without experience. So it's really your experience of life that you can talk to younger people. And I would say to any young person, yeah, if you could get somebody that you feel would be a good mentor, definitely have them. And a mentor is not somebody within your organization. Well, they're not a direct report. Like if you're my boss, you can't be my mentor as such. But I think, yeah, it's important to have somebody that they really admire and respect, that they could go to and have a chat. Some may be more personal or business or a mixture. It doesn't matter, whatever you need. And basically get guidance from these people, because let's face it, unless you've experienced things in life, it's very hard to understand them. And one of the things you do have at age is usually a lot of experience. I wouldn't say it was all positive. But and even for me, I know, when we talk here about, you have the baby boomers critical of Generation Z. Well, I'm working with these, and they just seem like another bunch of young people. And when I was young, I won't go into details, but I know one particular person was really good to talk to. It was never official back then. There wasn't really any of this. But this gentleman was, in his 50s when I was in my early 20s, and we could have a good chat about things in life. And I didn't realize that was mentoring, but it was, So, yeah, I would say and maybe for older people, get some young person who can mentor you on all this technology.
Okay. What makes you feel inspired to be your best self?
That is okay. That is a good question. Well, I think in life, I think I've mentioned it a bit earlier. It's you're always you've got so much out there, and particularly it was there when we were young, but now in social media, it's comparison. And of course, if you keep comparing yourself to other people, you're always going to find somebody, that's better than you. So for me, it's, you should always be aiming for perfection, even though you know you're never going to get there. And I think that's life. Try and be the best person you possibly can be, even though we're all human beings. So even though you can never get there, it's a bit like getting to as an Irish person, the crock of gold at the end of the rainbow. You can never get there. But I think that's very, very important for people, is not, what knowledge and skills do you have? What can you do to keep building on these, and just keep trying and learning? And to me, that really is why I keep going, because I think the day you stop learning could be, you want to keep this thing ticking over. So yeah, it's it's about finding what you're good at, and this is more geared towards young people, but it's never too late. Find what you're really good at, and just keep developing on that. And a few years ago, and I can never remember who wrote it, but the definition of wisdom is knowing what you know and equally knowing what you don't know. So, yeah, I would say for me, I enjoy what I'm doing, so when I go and give a lecture on some aspect of business, it's nearly a hobby as well as, so my areas, I love, although I try and avoid it a bit, but current affairs, business, I like to know what's going on in the world and try and make sense of it. But yes, for me, I've got areas of expertise. I like, I see something, it could be a podcast, it could be a new book or something. I want to learn more about it. So to me, it's a never ending story. And that really inspires me, and, you think, over 40, whatever years, all of that knowledge and experience, hopefully I'm now benefiting other people. And to me, if I go and sit at home, nobody, but at least doing a little bit of work on it means that I'm passing on some of what I have learned over my years to the next generation, which I think is very, very important. And I think I'm reasonably lucky to be in a situation where the things I sort of like doing and whatever are also things that I can do a bit of work on as well. So whether I'm working with a multinational or students at a university, it's great to see them. Oh yeah, we didn't know this. That's great, and yeah. So that's my inspiration, I suppose.
Wonderful. Okay, maybe on the same theme, and this is going to be a really tough question. What makes you smile? Apart from that question.
Well, I'll give you the positive and the negative. You may as well hear it. Okay, we'll start with the negative. You talked about critical thinking. And if I go in and I'm looking at a news article and then sometimes I just go to the comments just for a laugh. It's like a comedy show. I'm sorry to say, just to see how stupid some of the comments can be, or how little, and you just smile and you think, oh my God. So, I mean, I don't, but in a positive way, what makes me smile? Well, I think when, you see with people who are, we'll say, students, whether it's in training or in a university, when you see students really learning and they come to you and they're asking questions, maybe they're doing an assignment, and you can see they're really using their brains to figure something out and develop their understanding. It's nearly an internal smile, because it's a sort of, these people are really learning. They are they're pushing their brains, and that makes me quite happy, because I now know that the learning and development has really took place with these people. And to me, the best result in anything I do is the result of the people, And if I can see them doing something really well, sometimes you have students get up. I remember one presentation, this was many, many years ago, and I won't go, but it was a presentation on a case study. And the only thing I was sorry about with that presentation was I didn't have the cameras there, because these guys really hit it just perfect. It was brilliant. It was way above anything I expected. And that made me smile a lot, because not only did they have the content, they had the delivery, and they made it exciting as well.
Wonderful. Now, you might have touched on it before, but I won't make any assumptions. And I know you've been here for 24 years, and it's not the smoothest place to be. So what is your biggest pet peeve?
You mean living in Vietnam?
Yeah.
I suppose the bureaucracy sometimes, like you wonder why you have to sign your name 20 times on something. But yeah, I think it's becoming more digitized. But I mean, there are times, and like I had my own consulting company, and the amount of things you had to sign and you wondered what is the logic behind this. So I think that was a bit of a peeve. Was maybe I'm not I can be not too tolerant. For me, I'm looking at it as this is not productive. You know what I mean?
So project management kicking in there.
Yeah. So I'm looking at it purely on, well, why? You know, so you go somewhere, you wait for whatever, and then you sign all these forms, and then you go away, and then they come back and say, oh, you need to sign this one, or you didn't do this, or whatever. And, you know, that's only one person, but it's, you know, it's a huge drain on the resources. And I mean, it's the same all over the world. It's not just Vietnam. But yeah, the sometimes the mindless bureaucracy was something. Yeah, the traffic got to me a few times too.
Mm-hmm. No, but on the other hand, you know, this VNEID that's coming in, the digital identity. I personally feel it's going to help.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things got a lot better. I mean. And I think that digital ID is one that I haven't followed it too closely. I think when you're a company director, you have to. But yeah, it'll be great that if you can just have something on your phone that people can look at that identifies you, identifies me. And I mean, technology can do this. So to me, well, I'm not a technological person. I look at it as, well, I know technology can do this, so why isn't it done? Why do you need a physical driver's license when, you know, you could have it on your phone, and even in the worst case scenario, you could log in somewhere, and show them that you've got it. So, yeah, and I think that's will be a big advantage of technology. It'll actually get rid of a lot of this sort of unproductive type work.
Okay, what's the most unusual experience that you've ever had in business?
In business?
Yeah.
Oh, let me.
Or life.
A life on. I've I've a few unusual ones. I'm not sure if
you want to share them. We'll keep it business, strictly business.
Well, it was business. Well, actually, I'm going to go back a long time here, actually. And I mentioned earlier that, you know, about interpersonal skills. And I was a sort of, you know, the young graduate who thought he knew everything. And you end up in charge of about 46 people. And to me, when you went to school, then there was no such thing as soft skills. You know, there was just civil engineering. So to me, I thought this is quite simple. I know this is where the road is going. I need to survey it. I need to do the plan, the specification, all of the technical stuff. It's pretty straightforward. You know, nothing too challenging, a little bit, some design stuff. So, you know, and that's where I got this false sort of idea that I knew it all. But what I didn't, and this was in Ireland, and what I didn't take into account was two things. Was one, people, and the other one, well, I should have known about the weather, but it was a particularly bad summer, even by Irish standards, and you know how bad that would be. But for me, it was, and why I mentioned, you know, into the future, for me, I would say forgetting problems with the weather, nearly every problem was a people problem. But nothing, we didn't study that at university. It wasn't considered something you studied. And to me, if you developed the people skills and treated people with respect and whatever, I'm not saying I wasn't, I was probably more aloof, you can get a lot done. And I think that's still so important. For me, it was a big learning curve, because I realized that, well, yeah, all the technical stuff is fine, but we need to sort out all of these issues with people. And you know, and people are not rational beings; they are emotional. And of course, you learn very quickly you have to try as the boss to be able to try and manage all of that. I'm sure you. So to me, that was I was probably lucky. I got the lesson early, so then I could at least realize the importance of people. your business means nothing without the people. It doesn't matter how good your technology is, unless you've got a business that doesn't need any people. You need people skills. You need to know how to build and develop good relationships. And I think later on, there was the concept of emotional intelligence came along, and of course that only reinforced everything that, you have to know yourself, manage yourself, know other people, and manage your relationships. So I'd say to everybody, your ability, your interpersonal skills are definitely so important. And as I said before, I think for me it carried me through to now, and even with the tech, the digital world we're going into, I think is even more important in the future.
Okay, so my takeaway from that is, and from other things you said, is that some of the most important sort of human skills we need is the ability to communicate as humans with other humans, okay, and to be able to apply those critical thinking skills, so we do actually think for ourselves and make choices for ourselves. They're real sort of human areas, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I would like to. I'm going to give you one more example, but communication. I joke about this, but I say that the more means of communication we have, the standard of communication is going down. If you have to write a letter or write, I've had to handwrite a CV. But I think we're losing the quality of our communications, and like we're talking about oral and written communications. So just because you send somebody a text doesn't mean you've communicated with them. And people think, sometimes I do it myself, that an email has solved all the problems. But very quickly, I go back to when I was doing my MBA. I was studying economics, and this was in Australia. And this is about critical thinking. And I nearly forgot about it. But a couple of days before my economics exam, macroeconomics exam, there was two political parties who one's supposed to be over there, the other one's supposed to be over here. And I'm studying. I got the packages. So I panicked because I thought, they're so different. The news, they're telling you so different. And yet all my research and analysis is saying they're virtually the same. So why? So I rang up my professor, and after he stopped laughing, he said, one of the reasons, Brian, why they're so close is because they actually are so close. He said, just because the newspapers and the political parties are ever telling you they don't want you to think they're different, they're the same. And that goes back to what you mentioned earlier about critical thinking. And that was my best lesson in critical thinking. I had actually done a thorough job at critical thinking. Everything was telling me that what I'm finding is wrong, but actually what I was finding was right. And that's the importance of really doing the proper research. And from then on, that was, my other experience was more to do with interpersonal skills. This was to do with critical thinking skills and not accepting something just because it's said by somebody important or on some media. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's a really, really good example where you're trusting on your own skills and not being distracted by something else. Back then it was the media. Today it's probably still the media, but it's also GPTs and things who may be hallucinating, and you're taking shortcuts and forgetting how to think.
Very, very important.
Now, how can our listeners get hold of you if they want to get hold of you and learn more?
Well, I think the easiest way to get hold of me is LinkedIn. I won't even say how many connections I've got there, but if any of the listeners go onto LinkedIn, type in Brian O'Reilly, Vietnam, I think you'll get me, and my contact details would be there. Definitely my email address.
Okay, thank you, Brian, and we'll put all of those details in the show notes, folks. So don't worry about that. Now we've come to the end of our episode. Huge thank you to Brian sharing this wealth of experience that you have, education at a crossroads. But fear not, as humans, continue to communicate face to face with each other. It really is an important skill. as well as that critical thinking. So thanks again. Thanks for joining us at TRG Talk Digital, and we'll see you again next time. And thank you again, Brian.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Dion.